Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. We are glad to have you here on this final day of negotiations at COP26. This is a statement by the African civil society attending COP26 and those following the proceedings from home. After duly considering 2 weeks of debates, negotiations, and decisions, the Pan-African Climate Justice Alliance expresses disappointment with a clear lack of foresight and determination by parties at COP26 to squarely address the climate emergency. Most particularly, the Alliance is deeply concerned about the direction of UNFCCC COP processes, which continue to defer urgent action needed to strengthen climate resilience in the continent of Africa. COP26 was the hallmark of a clear northern agenda to pursue half measures that comfort the world's biggest polluters while oppressing African and other developing nation communities, which are among the most burdened by the adverse impacts of climate change. As representatives of more than 1,000 African civil society organizations operating at grassroots levels in 48 and more African countries, we leave Glasgow feeling COP26 was yet another COP that failed Africa. In our unyielding push for climate justice for Africa, we observe as follows. 1, it is now clear to us that UNFCCC COP process has been tailored to ignore the urgent needs of Africa. Adaptation and loss and damage continue to remain low on the global climate agenda, despite strong evidence of the devastating impact of extreme climate and weather events on the African people and economies. We welcome with cautious optimism and the announced plans to halt, eventually reverse deforestation, along with pledges to cut methane emissions. Important as they may be, these pledged mitigation actions fail to respond to the most urgent needs of protecting millions of people already affected by climate change across the African continent. As vulnerability hotspot, Africa faces a wider adaptation gap than the rest of the world. Far-reaching impacts are already being felt in agriculture, health, infrastructure, and livelihoods. In early September, for instance, Kenya declared a national disaster after a sharp drop in rainfall led to droughts in semi-arid and arid parts of the country. Similarly, droughts affecting the entire Horn of Africa as well as Madagascar, where the worst drought in 40 years has triggered widespread famine and malnutrition. Ladies and gentlemen, since 2012, the number of undernourished people in drought-prone parts of Africa has increased by 44%, according to the Food and Agriculture Organization. Elsewhere, in Nigeria and Tunisia, are still reeling out of the impact of the deadly wildfires orchestrated by a sweep of heat waves earlier this year. Floods and cyclones have killed more than 1,000 people, affected millions on the continent in the past few years. 2, emission reduction pledges remain way off mark. While halting deforestation is critical in capping global mean temperature at 1.5 degrees, significant progress is only possible through emission cuts from carbon-intensive production and consumption sectors, which account for 2/3 of global emissions. While almost everyone agrees there is no place for fossil fuels in the Paris Agreement-aligned world, world leaders have failed to signal strong commitments to phase out fossil fuels. Combined current emission reduction pledges only take us to a 2.8 degrees post-industrial warming by the end of the century. This is way off the 2 degrees and 1.5 ambition target of the Paris Agreement, at which Africa is still expected to experience a dangerous level of warming, droughts, and floods. The third observation, Africa's special needs and circumstances are yet to be fully addressed in the global climate negotiations. For the second year running, the Conference of the Parties deferred discussions on the special needs and circumstances of the African group to COP27. This indicates not only a lack of understanding of the urgency of protecting African populations already devastated by impacts of climate change, but it also shows a lack of concern of the part of the parties. We are particularly concerned that those we consider friends in groups like G77 and others hold hostile views towards this matter. We reiterate that despite accounting for barely 4% of global emissions, Africa is both the region that is most vulnerable to and the least capable of protecting itself from the adverse effects of climate change. Currently estimated to be warming at 1.5 times faster than the global mean temperature, the region is also experiencing disproportionate exposure to climate risks, which will worsen in the 2 to 3 degrees future. The fourth observation, ladies and gentlemen, is COP26 excluded key voices from the discussions. Access to protocols at the Scottish Event Centre hindered full and unrestricted participation. Despite assurances, the UK government failed to deliver an inclusive conference of the parties. Measures taken to ensure that COP26 took place in person were undermined by restricted access to important meetings and fora. This created procedural justice problems that have delegitimized the decisions that will be taken at COP26. Another observation, global climate talks continue to ignore science. The global community must depoliticize the climate crisis and treat it as what it truly is, an existential threat to people and natural systems all over the world. Political declarations by world leaders fail to reflect the spirit and direction of negotiations. COP26 failed to address the mutual suspicion and mistrust that has characterized the climate debate so far.